Hi and welcome to AXSChat. This week we're delighted to welcome John Robinson, who's the Managing Director of Our Ability. John, welcome to AXSChat. Glad to have you here. Can you give us a little bit about your background? I know you're doing great stuff in the US and internationally, and Deborah speaks very highly of you, but for our audience, can you tell us a bit about what it is you do and also a bit about Our Ability?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here. Uh, I run and own Our Ability Incorporated. Our Ability started approximately 7 years ago as an answer to the issues that I knew living with being an individual with a disability looking for employment. About 7 years ago, I would start to get asked to speak to businesses, to organizations, to schools, and I would speak about my own obstacles that I've overcome in my life. I've flown around the world speaking, but never really thought about it much until I would say that when I was a young person looking for employment, uh, going through my education, some 25, 30 years ago, I really had no role model to look to with a physical disability that I could reach out to and speak to. And the very few other people that I saw with obvious physical disabilities inside, at that time, corporate America, they would agree with that. They would say, you know what, we really didn't have anyone else either. And so we started Our Ability as a way to begin that conversation around employment and education. We do so many things. In the past 6, 7 years, we've grown that work into a digital platform, into mentoring, into working inside businesses to build employment opportunities. We do so many things, but at the end of the day, we are about growing employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities uh, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, and we're proud to do it. And the main reason is that when I graduated university with a degree in television, radio, film from one of the best colleges in the country, took me 4.5 years to find a job. Nobody would hire me. All they wanted to see was, that I had no arms and no legs, and they assumed that I had no ability. And it took me a long time to overcome that, and I've never forgotten those 4.5 years. And we're trying to help others make sure that time frame is not the same.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's absolutely a real barrier for people is the perceptions of the abilities of individuals. It's something that, as a representative of a large employer, we're trying to become more disability confident. So absolutely, we in the UK at least there's a two-tick scheme, which it means that anyone that declares a disability gets to interview. Now, we can't guarantee to get into the minds of all of the people that are holding those interviews, but we are providing unconscious bias training, etc. I think it's something that we're trying to do right. But a lot of companies, even with the best will in the world, you're down to the individual that's interviewing at the end of the day and their attitude. How lucky you are to get the right person and the right attitude interviewing you. And I think that whilst you can set up frameworks, etc., absolutely, there's still a long way to go. And I was lucky in that I don't have an obvious physical disability. My disability is hidden. Um, but I do empathise because I spent an awful lot of time. And when you get to the 400th rejection letter,
Yeah.
it's demoralising. So any work and anyone that's doing work to help people get jobs, fulfil their potential, and help people understand that talent doesn't come in a regularised package really has my full support. Deborah, I know you've got a question.
Yes, so one thing that I would like John to address, John and I have known each other several years, and I've known about John's working with him. But I think that one reason why John and the work that his company is doing is having more success than I see others having in the United States. It's because he's, and I'm putting words in your mouth, John, so feel free to say, you're wrong, Deborah. But I think he's looking at this from a corporate lens. You know, he has a for-profit company, I believe it's for-profit, right, John?
Yes. Yep. Correct.
And yeah, and he's looking at this as a business. You know, okay, we see that people with qualified, talented individuals with disabilities, some with college degrees, some without, are ready to work and be part of your workforce. But there's this gigantic, you know, chasm between people with disabilities getting these jobs, and so there's all kind of fears and there are kind of different reasons why we're not being successful. But I think another thing that's very powerful about John's story is that John represents both worlds. He represents a businessman. He represents an entrepreneur. He understands corporate language. He is an advocate. He has created this our ability, and he can talk more about his database and all the different things he's doing. But I think the reason why John is being so successful is because he's talking about it from the employer's perspective. What do the employers need to do? What do they need to understand to really recruit and retain qualified people with disabilities in their workforce? And that's one reason why I've always been interested in John's work. He's having the business-to-business conversations. And so that's my perception, John. I don't know if you want to correct me or dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I will. You know, you're exactly right. We start from a place that all of us come from our experiences, right? We've gotten to know vocational rehabilitation in the United States, and I don't want to speak poorly about voc rehab, but I was a voc rehab consumer at a certain point. And you watch case managers lead with, there's a tax break if you hire John. You watch case managers lead with, you know, John needs a job. No, all of those may be true. No, John has an ability to do this job, and has an ability and a skill set that will be to a higher economic advantage to the business. Where we look at this is from building the business case. If we build a business case, it doesn't matter the size of the business. The business will listen, because every business, their number one asset are the employees that they have that are loyal, dedicated, hardworking, and are unique to their world, regardless of disability, right? So if we build the business case on employing somebody that is hardworking, dedicated, loyal, will be there, then the business understands that. And when you lead with as a commodity and as an economic benchmark, then you're not talking about ability or disability. You're not talking about quotas. You're not talking about tax benefits or breaks. You're talking about the bottom line. And every business, large, small, in between, care about one thing, and that's a profitable bottom line. And that's why we lead with that.
Okay. And absolutely with you. Bottom line is everything. It doesn't matter which business you're in. You know, you can dress everything else up nicely, but ultimately it's the figures that count. So I'm totally with you, and I think we do need to speak the language of business. I've done a business degree myself, and I think it's really important that the disability community understands that when they're talking to business, that they've got to use the language of business and not the language of disability, which is scary and alien to a lot of businesses that are not familiar. The last thing we want to do is alienate the people that we want to be working for, working with, etc. So before I bring Antonio in for a question, Deborah mentioned you have databases and stuff. So what kind of sort of technical services are you offering to employers and employees, potential employees?
It's a great question. We've tried to look at this through a holistic approach. In our world, and I think every business understands that, you have candidates on one side and you have job openings on another side. And then in our world of individuals with disabilities, you know, as we talked about at the very beginning, we have the great unknown. How do we speak to? How do we answer the questions of? How do we deal with the communication of that? So if you look at those 3 points of connectivity, what we've done is we've done two things. First and foremost, we've built a database called Connect, and it's a lack of a better term, it's a LinkedIn for individuals with disabilities. We've invested our own money and resources into building Connect. So individuals with disabilities around the world can sign into Connect, build their profile, i.e. their ability, not focus on their disability, but build up their ability so that individuals can see who they are over time. Whether you're 16, 36, 66, you're building up your resume as you move along through life. No different when you're an individual with a disability. We want people to go into Connect and continuously build up their skills, their points. Because the other side of it is the businesses that we work with search the database, place job postings. And those job postings go on the dashboard of each individual. So if you're used to Facebook and you see your news feeds, or you're used to LinkedIn and you see your news feeds, no, on Connect, the news feed that you get are job postings of companies that we work with. So we're trying to create a technological bridge to that pipeline answer. At the same time, we are consulting with businesses on proper disability etiquette, proper sensitivity, language, how to interact either with a person with a disability or not, or to managers how to properly talk about the issues or not. While we're building the pipeline, we're also working with businesses one-on-one to properly understand how to and what's appropriate, not appropriate in the connectivity. Maybe the third point of light is, we get contacted an awful lot by individuals one-on-one that have questions. And so an individual will come in and sign into our system and look for work and build their profile. But I'll tell you, I get an email every day from an individual with a specific question that would like something answered. So, without knowing that this is what was going to happen, we are very quickly not only building the business case, but we're being the conduit for building that business case for both the individual and the business, large and small, that wants to work with each other.
And do you see commonality of issues? Are the same questions being asked time and time again? The particular hot topics?
Yeah, on the business side, absolutely. Every business leads with this: we're not good enough, but we know we need to get better. Great statement by the business. The fact that they think that, they're already ahead of most businesses, right? Because when they think that they're not doing well, they're at least thinking about it, and that's ahead of 50% of the businesses that aren't thinking about it at all. So then what they ask is, we just don't know how to find candidates, how to speak to candidates, and how to retain candidates with disabilities. And so conversation after conversation, we just went to a national conference for human resource managers 3 weeks ago. Almost every conversation is, we just don't know how to find the candidates. And so those two statements are the most commonality that we hear, that we're not far enough along in disability as far as diversity and inclusion, and we don't know how to find. And so, we're trying to help them realize, you are farther along than some. Yes, we could all use improvement, but yes, we all need to be able to find those candidates so that we can get people to disclose, open up, and find meaningful employment.
Do you think that when we're talking about they're not able to find the candidates, do you think that they are assessing their systems enough to allow the candidates to find them?
I think it's quite a few things. First and foremost, marketing and media are so prevalent in our society worldwide. We need to recognize that, and we need to recognize that and use that for good purposes. And here's my example. If I were 19 and a quadruple amputee instead of 48 and a quadruple amputee, I would be on Snapchat, I would be all over Twitter, I would be using YouTube to watch my videos, I would be getting my marketing from complete social media platforms. And I would notice on those social media platforms, while I'm looking at Kim Kardashian, I'm also looking at what businesses employ individuals with disabilities or have individuals with disabilities in their marketing. So we have to be smart and intelligent in our external marketing that include individuals with disabilities so that we get people, when they're looking for employment, to be comfortable with that business as an organization. And then on the other side of it is, yes, we are not utilizing the internal databases, the opportunities that we have inside to create a warm, welcome, open employment environment so that individuals with disabilities, either visible or hidden, are disclosing who they really are. Time and time again, we have been working with businesses to get people to bring their whole self to work so that we're not hiding a portion of ourselves. We're open to say, you know, maybe I have epilepsy, maybe I have diabetes, maybe I am a quadruple amputee and uncomfortable to let people know that until you see me. We've got to create that environment so that individuals can be open and forthcoming when they're applying, when they're working side by side with somebody, so that nothing's hidden. And, you know, in this day and age, like I said, of social media where everything's open, we have to utilize that. So we have to use the external technology like Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube to create the environment that, hey, business XYZ is open and inclusive, and then internally on your intranet, on your emails, on your HR servers, create stories that are open and welcoming so that we know that we're here and we're supported and loved.
I was recently on an event for HR professionals in Ireland, and we were talking about inclusion, disability, diversity, and then you realize that people don't feel confidence enough, or they are afraid to mess up with something, and that's one of the reasons why they end up doing nothing. That is even worse.
Yeah.
So how can we, also, and we also need to understand that sometimes people that come from a HR background, they don't really have an history of training during their process at college or university. How can we, somehow fill in the gap and make sure that they are able to build some confidence and be able to be part of all this as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I looking back and looking for my employment at any stage of my life, in my own mind, I'm starting with 2 strikes against me, to use a U.S. baseball analogy. I'm starting in my own mind that I cannot make a mistake. I have to be perfect. And when anybody feels that way, you're not going to be at your optimal performance because you're worried about making mistakes rather than thinking about the ability that you have. I think we have to recognize that, and I think the business community has to recognize that a person with a disability has an interview, has an opportunity for employment, whatever it is, that we have to allow the same level of successes and failures that you would with any other candidate, because we are no different. The difference is that we've been rejected so many times, as Neil said at the beginning, right, that in our own mind we're so afraid. So we have to be open to that fear so that the mistake isn't magnified, so that we're building the confidence of the individual first and foremost. I can remember having my first 2 or 3 jobs. I'm so worried about a mistake that when I did make a mistake, I thought I was going to get fired. No, what? No, you're not going to get. Everything's fine. It's just a mistake. That's how it normally goes. When you build on the ability of the individual and focus on the ability, we all will allow success and failure, because that's human nature. But when you focus just on failure, either from an individual side or a business side, then you're looking for the failure, and then you're going to follow that path to its negative end, which is not employment. So we've got to be able to build up the positives, and we've got to remember that I'm coming into the job thinking about, oh my goodness, I have really only one opportunity to make this successful.
So I know Deborah's got another question, but I just wanted to pick up on both your and Antonio's point, which was about the businesses not, feeling uncomfortable, and how do we enable and empower businesses to feel much more at ease dealing with their progress so far, and also how they deal with people with disabilities, how they address them, etc. Do you, and this is something that I'm very much in favour of, is sharing experiences. Is part of the reason we started AXSChat. Um, I, I'm involved in a number of sort of forums where businesses openly share stuff. Obviously, Chatham House rules; it's sort of behind closed doors. But I think that it's incredibly useful. So, how do you facilitate that sharing?
Yeah, we have to share, and we have to get the businesses to recognize that sharing is vital. Um, because again, I will be more comfortable if I know that I'm going to work with an organization that already has people like me. It doesn't have to be, no arms and no legs. It has to be, other people with disabilities. So we have to get the business to recognize that and to get them to open up the stories that they have. Um, example, we worked with Merck Pharmaceutical for a long time, and we got Merck to open up their own existing employees and their stories and share them around inside their intranet and HR space. And we do this repeatedly, but we have to impress upon the business that these stories need to be shared, and it shouldn't just be inside a business resource group, although that's a wonderful tool. It's got to be beyond the business resource group into the whole corporation. We've got to spill out marketing, sales, throughout inside corporate America, senior leadership. We have got to tell these stories so that everybody is more welcoming. We all understand that probably in the C-suite of every large corporation in the world, they have a family member with a disability. They are a person with a disability that they're hiding, right? We've got to stop that. We've got to get them to stand up, be proud, talk about who they are, so that the corporations lead this. As an example, I'm wearing a lime green ugly shirt today, sort of on purpose. We just came off of a 2-week hand cycle trip across 380 miles in New York State. And we do it every year to raise awareness, specifically in the business community, about the ability and power of people with disabilities. And time again, we talk with the community about we need our elected officials, our governments, our legislators to lead this effort. Yes, that would be great. They're not going to do it. Where we can really win is get the business community to lead first, get the business community to open up, and then our elected officials will follow behind. And we've heard this story over and over and over again, and that's why we've got to get the businesses to be willing to share their shining examples, and they have them. And if we can do that, we can get more opportunities with other businesses, and then we don't need the governments to do it, because we'll have created more tax-paying citizens, more jobs, more opportunities, more successful individuals, and we'll stop looking at the candidates with 2 strikes against them. We'll start to see them for, hey, they've got ability to do a job.
John, I always enjoy listening to you speak, and I'm sitting here writing down all the quotes that you're saying that are so brilliant. Bring your whole self to work, and seeing that as an advantage. And you give me goosebumps, because I love the work that you're doing, because it's empowering, and there's so many things in my mind, but I agree with you. We cannot expect our governments to do this, and our governments are failing trying to do this. We cannot expect that. It's not sustainable. And it's also very interesting as a person without a disability, and of course I have a family member. My daughter has Down syndrome, and I'm passionate about this topic, but I think it's so important that people with visible disabilities are engaged, heavily engaged in these conversations, and people with invisible disabilities as well. But instead of it always being, often I'm in a room with, and the conversations start with employers. Are there any barriers to employment? Well, we know what that means in the U.S. You're threatening, you have sued me. Maybe I deserve to be sued. When I wrote my book, and last week I was flashing it across, but I really am proud of the work I did. It's just a small start of this, but one thing that we saw over and over, there was so much misinformation about this, and others have already employed people with disabilities, but the problem is people with disabilities all over the world don't feel comfortable saying, I'm Neil Milken and I have dyslexia. And the reality in my world is there's certain things that that I struggle to do. I'm brilliant because Neil is brilliant, and it would be a real shame if Atos did not see the brilliance that he brought to the table. John, you're another great example. You have a great attitude. You're an entrepreneur. You are a person with a disability, but it's like, so what? That's who you are. It's like, so getting us all to change the conversations. How do we change these conversations? And some of the conversations I see coming out of social media from the disability, it's so dark and it's so negative, and it just terrifies employers. And we actually at AXSChat, the three of us have been doing this it'll be 3 years in November, and this is a heavy lift. But we do it, we volunteer our time, we do this every single Tuesday. And so we're committed to this, but we were actually attacked when we brought on a guest like this guest. And the reason why they didn't like him, it wasn't even really good and grounded. It was just, I don't like you for whatever reason.
Right.
And I'm sure in their mind they thought it were very good reasons, but it was interesting for us to walk this path, because we're all so dedicated to this. But I think the conversations that you're bringing to the table, what if I was interviewed on a podcast the other day, and the gentleman, his name is James Taylor, not the musician, but he focuses on creativeness, and he said, wow, wouldn't it be so cool to do a survey to see if people with disabilities consider themselves more creative than people without disabilities? Because I know for a fact many people with disabilities are more innovative and more creative because they sort of don't have a choice, So John, tell me how you are going to ride this bicycle 300-something miles across the state of New York, sorry, when you don't have arms and legs. Tell me, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
So I think the opportunity to change our paradigms and what we think people's abilities are and are not is a real opportunity for all of us. And I threw a lot at you, so.
Well, you're right. We are attacked from every level. Just in our country, if you look at the gun control issue, immediately we're talking about mental health in a negative way. And I can, there's example after example after example. We've got to get positive stories out there.
Yes.
And if we can get positive stories out there inside companies, outside companies, then we can start to combat that a little bit. And that's what we have to do, whether it be you or me or any of us or anybody listening. We've got to share the positives, because if we lead with the negatives, we'll make no changes in this world. And we can't survive from an economic standpoint by not doing that, because in our country, baby boomers have left the workforce. And we need to use and utilize the abilities, and that includes people with disabilities today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I love the leadership you're showing. I love the leadership, and I'm going to turn it over to Neil now, but I just love the work you're doing, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, as just before we close, I totally agree about the positive message. We can't focus on negativity. There's lots of stuff that's broken, and one of the things that I kind of forgot to mention before was we employ maturity models within organizations. They're well understood within IT organizations. You know, you've got the security and maturity model, you've got your IT infrastructure security model. Well, yeah, have one for accessibility too. And what you see is that even the most leading organizations are marking themselves down. And I think that collaboration, that sharing, and we went through an exercise where about 20 organizations all sat around the table and did a rough estimation of where they were on the various different points on an accessibility maturity model. Was really interesting. The people that are sort of held up as the leading lights are still only giving themselves 3.5 out of 5. And it encourages other companies that are starting that journey to step forward, feel less uncomfortable. And I think that the last thing we want to do is use negative language when we're talking about this stuff, because we want to have a big tent approach. So I'm really glad that you're taking the approach you are. You're focusing on positives. You're focusing on the skills. Really important for us. We need innovative skills. We need people that can think differently, that can look and be able to adapt. You know, people with disabilities are fantastic at being able to adapt to circumstance. In fact, we named our disability network Atos Adapt, because we're adapting to our circumstances, but we're also hopefully playing it back into the business to help the business adapt to be more welcoming for us. And we hope that this is going to have a knock-on positive effect for the rest of our employees. So I'm going to close out now, but thank you, and I'm really looking forward to you joining us for our Q&A on Twitter. So thank you very much, John. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much. It's been an honor.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your work, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.